If you're a Christian husband and you've ever thought, I'm terrified to spend money, my wife feels like a single mom. Do I have to make people fear me in order to respect me? I love my hobbies more than my duties. This Q&A is for you. This week's comments were brutal in a good way. We've got wives talking about money anxiety, husbands admitting they dumped the hard work of discipline on their wife, guys asking if fear is necessary for respect, men crushed by their wife's post baby resentment, and real questions about how to pray and put hobbies in their place. They're straight from you in the comments. So let's open them up, apply Catholic teaching, and get concrete about what you must do as a husband. And remember, next week's Q&A will be built from your comments on this video. So stick around because your situation is probably sitting right here in someone else's story. First up, money anxiety and scrupulous frugality. Flower Faith 1. All right, this first one is from a wife. I want you to listen to this as a husband. I've developed bad anxiety about spending money or having stuff. Is there a point where frugality can be sinful or bad? We're not stingy, we give to the church and family, but I become extremely anxious about spending any money on day-to-day things. So that's from a wife's point of view, and that's Flower Faith 1. This is huge because a lot of you are married to this woman, and some of you are this woman, but in male form. So let's think about when frugality stops being a virtue. The church praises temperance and liberality, being prudent and generous with material goods. But every virtue has two cliffs. On the one side, waste and prodigality. On the other, miserliness and fear. Frugality becomes disordered when you neglect duties of your state. So you won't buy decent clothes for the kids, won't fix dangerous things in the house. You refuse reasonable comfort for your family out of fear, or your anxiety about money chokes out trust in God's providence. That's not just a quirky personality. That can become a sin against justice, not providing what's truly needed, and against hope, acting as if God won't take care of you unless you white knuckle everything. If you're the husband and your wife is like this, you're not meant to just shrug and say, well, she's frugal. You're the one responsible before God for the ordering of the home, which includes the ordering of finances and the emotional climate around money. Now, next up, Luke's comment. This is from our husband doing it well. Listen to this. I've been implementing some principles about this. Look at all your finances, necessities, luxuries, and savings. Figure out an amount your wife can have stress-free. She can spend it however she likes. The key is to make sure it's generous enough for freedom, but not so much it hurts the family's finances. My wife really likes this. She said she didn't want to think about too many things when it came to finances. She knows how the rest of the money gets spent, but she doesn't have to check in regularly. This is a man living headship as service. He takes responsibility for the budget. He protects his wife from constant low-grade money fear. He gives her a clear, generous sandbox to play in. From a Catholic lens, that's ordered charity and justice. He's given her what's reasonably due for her role. He's trusting God, not by being reckless, but by being generous within reason. So here's what you do as a husband. If your wife is like Flower Faith, first you set a clear plan. You sit down, you look at income, necessities, savings, and you say, here's what we can afford for groceries and your free spending each month. Inside this, you don't need to feel guilty. Next, you speak to her fear calmly. I see that you get anxious when we spend. I'm not going to lead us into irresponsibility. Part of my job is to carry that weight so you don't have to be afraid every time we buy nappies. And then third, you check your own heart. Are you using frugality as a cope to avoid generosity, or as an excuse not to enjoy good things with your family? And from her side, and any wife watching, this anxiety should also be brought to confession, and ideally to a spiritual director or wise priest, because sometimes there's genuine scrupulosity mixed in, blaming yourself or feeling dirty for every purchase. If finances are a constant source of panic in your home, stay with me, because later we'll hit a husband who would rather play with hobbies than go earn more for his family. Next up, solo parenting, chaos, and fatherhood. We've got 3 comments that together pretty much describe a lot of your homes. First, from Joyful Minimalist, a wife. Marry a devout woman. When you come home, pick your annoyances wisely. Come home with a warm, receptive demeanor and help mum without complaint. Then do some activity that commands attention daily, like a Bible passage, a prayer, or going around talking about your day and thanking the Lord. Be a man that can control his emotions, whom the kids always see praying or reading the Bible, and you'll be a steady rock. Then, Matthew Vincenzi, a dad. Good habits are formed very early. I see too many parents, even in traditional settings, letting the child lead. Kids have no self-control. Yell no at parents. Run around during mass. It doesn't need to be that way. Children can be told no. They can be taught to pray the rosary long before formal catechism classes. And then this from a husband, David McCormick. You're describing my situation at home perfectly. I try my best to tame my anger, and so my deflection comes off as passive. I let my wife do the hard work, sometimes in fighting the kids. Not good, hey? No, not good, but you're not alone. So, first, let's look at your wife feeling like a single mum. When a wife says, I feel like a single parent, that's not drama. That's often a fairly accurate description of underused male strength. Catholic moral theology is clear. As a husband and father, you're responsible for the common good of the household, which includes order, peace, and the upbringing of the children. If your wife is permanently drowning in chaotic kids while you hide behind work, phone, or hobbies, that's a failure in justice to your state in life. So what Joyful Minimalist described is basically the blueprint. You walk in the door as a steady rock, not a sulky teenager. You help without complaint. You don't pick every annoyance. You save big stuff for a calm moment. And you lead some kind of daily family focus. Prayer, scripture, even just a gratitude circle. That is headship. That is spiritual leadership. Now, for the point about discipline and letting the child lead, Matthew Vincenzi is hitting another modern disease: child-centered, feminist parenting, where the kid rules the roost. The tradition is unapologetic on this. Children are to be formed, not followed. Parents, and especially fathers, must teach obedience, self-control, reverence. That doesn't mean screaming or cruelty. It means calm, firm boundaries with real consequences for disrespect and disobedience. If you don't teach your kids to say no to you, they will say yes to sin, the culture, and the devil, and that's on you. Now, the husband who lets her do the hard work. Back to David McCormick's point. I let my wife do the hard work, sometimes in fighting the kids. This is where a lot of you are. You don't want to be the bad guy. You're scared of your temper, so you retreat and let your wife fight the kids alone. From a moral theology side, that's a failure in both courage and charity. Courage because you don't want the discomfort of conflict. Charity because you're letting your wife take wounds that should be shared under your leadership. Yes, you must control your anger, but the answer to anger is not passivity. It's disciplined strength. You choose the tone and the consequences before the situation, and you stick to it calmly. So, practical homework for dads. This week, sit down with your wife and set 3 simple rules for the kids with clear consequences. Tell your wife, I will enforce these. You won't be alone in this anymore. When you come home, your default is phone down, enter the chaos, lead the order. If you're already feeling convicted, good, because now we're going to turn up the heat and talk about respect, fear, and the line between strong headship and abuse. So, respect, fear, and am I abusive? Let's start with this from Katak. Respect is one part hope and one part fear. If you don't make people fear you, they won't respect you. It's that simple. The whole you can be nice rhetoric is women's bullshit. Then JB708, you have exactly one chance to set the tone with a woman, and that's at the very beginning. You can lose it at any time. If you defer to her even once, she becomes the head of the family, and you'll spend the rest of your life being her disrespected man helper. Attempting to reassert yourself will be futile. And Sitka49 gives this example. My brother-in-law decides every year what vacation they're taking, and it's the same thing geared to what he likes, a mosquito-plagued fishing trip. Staying home isn't an option. Is it abusive? Maybe not, but certainly domineering. Once that ball starts rolling in that direction, it seems to escalate. So, do you need to terrify your wife to lead? And if you've been too soft, are you doing? Let's look at fear versus reverence. The church absolutely teaches that authority should be respected, and there is such a thing as filial fear, a healthy fear of displeasing someone that you love and depend on. But it is gravely wrong to use authority by threatening harm, creating a climate of terror, or using physical or emotional violence to control your wife. That's not headship, that's abuse. Christ is the model. People did fear offending him, but the weak, the wounded, the sinful could run to him, not hide in terror. If your wife and kids are always walking on eggshells because they're afraid of your rage or your punishment, that's not respect. That's bondage. Now, the one chance to lead fatalism idea. The idea that you have one shot at leadership, and if you ever defer to her, you're finished forever, that's just not how grace works. Yes, early dynamics in a relationship matter. If you spent 10 years being passive, it will be hard to change, but the sacrament of marriage gives you grace of state for your duties. You can repent, you can grow in virtue, you can change your pattern. It may be slow, she may resist, there may be a lot of repair work, but saying it's futile is basically denying the power of grace. So if you've been soft and deferential, confess the cowardice. Start leading calmly in small, consistent ways. Accept that respect is usually regained over time, not in one big speech. But what about being domineering versus abusive? Back to the fishing trip brother-in-law. He decides every holiday based on what he enjoys, ignores his wife and kids' preferences, and frames any alternative as not an option. Is that necessarily mortal sin? Abuse? Not automatically. But it is a distortion of headship. Headship is meant to seek the common good of the family. You absolutely have the final say in prudential decisions. But you're bound in justice and charity to seriously consider your wife's good, your kids' good, and to sacrifice your own preferences sometimes. If every big decision tilts towards your comfort, your hobbies, your interests, you're living a selfish caricature of authority, not Christ-like authority. So the line, in simple terms, is this: strong leadership, calm, consistent, willing to sacrifice yourself first, willing to say no for the family's real good. Strong leadership, calm, consistent, willing to sacrifice yourself first, willing to say no for the family's good. Abuse or domineering, using fear, isolation, or selfishness, so that your wife's and children's legitimate goods are constantly sacrificed to your ego or comfort. Now, let's talk about one of the most painful places all this shows up, the bedroom, especially when her body has been wrecked by generosity and your desire has dried up. So, her body, children, and loss of attraction. This is from Hunter 2689. Other than obesity, being forced to be open to life while also not allowed to deny the marital debt and having 4 kids, resulting in loose skin, stretch marks, all the sacrifice and suffering that being open to life entails. Then the husband feeling like he doesn't desire her or want her anymore. Absolutely horrible. Tragic. And then this is from Nicomical Rowing 5935. What if the woman has put on massive weight, more than doubled due to laziness, literally sitting on the couch eating junk food, despite you telling her it's not good for her health and that you see it as disrespectful? The loss of attraction is then a response to her lack of respect or her lack of love for you, rather than just her physical appearance. These are 2 very different cases. First, when her body is marked by generosity. In this case, she's been obedient to church teaching on openness to life. She's born multiple children, her body shows it, and the husband retreats in attraction. From the church's perspective, this is an injustice. She has cooperated with God in bringing immortal souls into existence. Her body is literally marked by sacrificial love. For him to then despise or recoil from those marks is to despise a work of God and of her generous cooperation. That doesn't mean you have to pretend you're thrilled by every stretch mark. Neither does she. But it does mean you must fight porn and fantasy which warp your standards. Fight resentment and fight the lie that your wife owes you a teenage body for life. Your attraction must be retrained by grace, gratitude, and virtue. You're called to love her as your own body. You wouldn't abandon your own body when it's wounded by service. You tend it. Same with hers. But what about when there's real neglect? In the second case, we have massive intentional neglect. She literally sits on the couch eating junk food, ignores his reasonable concerns for her health, and communicates by her actions, I don't care about your values or the temple of my body. Here, there is a matter of justice on her side. A wife, like a husband, has a duty to care reasonably for her health and appearance according to her state and means. If she's deliberately choosing gluttony and sloth, regardless of the impact on the marriage, that's a sin. But you as husband must still act as a Catholic man, not as a pagan critic. That means you address it firmly but charitably. I love you and I'm worried about your health and our marriage. I see a pattern of junk food and no movement. This isn't about you being hot enough. It's about you being able to be here for our kids and us honoring God with our bodies. You examine your own habits. Are you fit, sober, disciplined? Or are you asking of her what you won't do for yourself? You lead practically, healthy food in the house, time carved out for her to move, maybe walking together. Even here, you're not entitled to cruelty, sarcasm, humiliation, name calling. Those are sins whether she's 60 kilos or 160 kilos. In both cases, porn and fantasy are off the table. They're not a solution. They're a mortal sin that will further destroy your ability to see your wife as God does. Now we've got hobbies, duties, and basic prayer. Last pair, and these go nicely together. This is from Matthew Hall. I'm finding the desire for hobbies and rest time is pulling my attention away from what I need to do to raise my provision for my family. What tools could I use to take these thoughts captive and lead myself towards getting more excited about providing? What does a healthy relationship with downtime look like for a man with his priorities straight? And then from Bujakovsky, fantastic content. I really appreciate your suggestions on prayer. Can you offer some general tips on how to pray? So these are basically, how do I stop wasting myself on hobbies, and how do I actually pray like a man? So let's look at duties first, hobbies second. Catholic moral theology is very simple here. You have duties of state to your wife, children, and work. You also have legitimate need for rest and recreation. Rest becomes a problem when it regularly eats into your duties, or you love it more than the people you're responsible for. So, practical mindset. Name your duties of state clearly. Provision. I must do X to increase income or stability. Home. Y tasks I must handle each week. Marriage. Z time for my wife. Then schedule rest after duty, not before. You don't ask, do I feel like working? You ask, have I done what justice demands today? Then you enjoy legitimate rest without guilt. Third, reframe providing as your masculine mission. You're not just going to work, you're building a stable ark for your family in a flood. When you catch your mind wandering to hobbies, you bring it back with something like, my children's future matters more than this game, guitar, show. I'll enjoy that once I've done what a man must do. That's not repression, that's ordered love. Then, how to pray as a husband? On prayer, you don't need to make it complicated. Start with 3 things. A fixed daily time, even just 10, 15 minutes. Pick a time you can actually keep. Morning, before your kids wake up, your lunch break, after they're in bed. Then have some sort of concrete structure. Begin with the sign of the cross. Then 1 to 2 minutes telling God honestly where you're at. Lord, here's what I'm afraid of. Here's where I've failed. Then read a short passage of the Gospels or epistles. Talk to Christ about what you read and how it hits your duties as a husband today. End with a simple act of contrition and resolution. Today, I will do X differently with your grace. Tie it to your state. Regularly bring your wife and kids before God by name. Lord, show me how to love her better. Show me where I'm failing my kids. You're not trying to feel mystical. You're learning to stand before God as the man responsible for a little domestic church. All right, that was a lot. Quick recap of what we've hit. Money anxiety and when frugality turns into fear instead of virtue. Wives feeling like single moms because husbands won't enter the chaos. The difference between reverent respect and fear-based intimidation. What to do when your wife's body has changed from sacrifice or from neglect. How to put hobbies in their place and build a simple prayer life as a husband. Now, 2 things before you go. In the comments, tell me which one of these hit you hardest and what's one concrete change you're going to make this week. Money fear, solo parenting, misused headship, resentment around her body, or hobby addiction. Your comments are where I pull questions for next Sunday's Q&A. So don't lurk, put it down there. And second, if you want real help doing this work day in, day out, inside Patriarchy.com, we go deeper on headship, conflict, sex, money, fatherhood, and prayer with men who are actually doing it. You get step-by-step training, a community of serious Christian husbands doing the same work surrounding you, and one-on-one coaching on your exact situation from me. Men inside already reporting fewer blow-ups, warmer wives, and homes that finally feel peaceful again. So if this Q&A exposed you and you know you need structure and accountability, head to patriarchy.com, jump into the free trial, and start doing the work. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, you're not just a guy with problems. You're a husband under Christ, responsible for a little kingdom. Act like it.